life. Now, His sovereign will. We can't see far down the line. You got John Sexton and Amy, you got Robin and all these other people who have this music up in front of them, this musical score in front of them. See, if you're out in the audience, and you're just listening to the music, you only know what's happening in the immediate. You only know what's happening. If you've never heard the song before, you just know that note that just happened and the ones behind. But God has the entire sheet of music. He can see the music that was behind. He can see like these musicians can. He can see what was behind him. He can see right there, and he can see what's in front of him. And many times we don't know what's going to happen here. We don't have any idea, but God has seen the entire sheet of music. And He knows what His will is for your life. And we battle, and we fight, and we see all His sovereign will He can see on down the line. Let me read something. Anybody in here seen A Wonderful Life? Christmas time, just about everybody's seen It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey comes in here and he says these words to Mary. He says, Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and the next day, and the next year, and the year after that. I'm going to leave this little town far behind, and I'm going to see the world. Italy, Greece, Parthenon, Colosseum. Then I'm coming back here, and I'll go to college and see what they know. And then I'm going to build things. I'm going to build airfields. I'm going to build skyscrapers 100 stories high. I'm going to build bridges a mile long. But if you've seen the movie, that's not what ends up happening. He suddenly remembers and knows what's important in life. He suddenly realizes and knows the things he ought to be doing. See, we got all kinds of plans for our future. We say, oh yeah, that's where I'm going to be. That's where I'm going to be, and that's where I need to be, when we don't realize God has a plan of where He's going to put you. He's going to put you somewhere. And you can either go peacefully or you can go kicking and fighting. But folks, it's going to be a whole lot easier on you if you realize it's time to do what God's called me to do. It's time to put me exactly where He's told me to go. It's time for me to walk in that and eat His will as my food. The person at the Holiday Inns, I've stayed at Holiday Inns, I've stayed at Holiday Inn Expresses. I act like a doctor a lot of times because I stay at a Holiday Inn Express. But here's the thing, folks. The guy until he was almost 40 years old, he worked in a sawmill. The guy who started Holiday Inns, he worked in the sawmill. And he thought everything was going fine. And all of a sudden they walked in and they handed him a pink slip. He said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So he went home and he told his wife, he said, you know what? I'm going to mortgage our little house and I'm going to start building things. And he started building. Within 5 years, he was a multimillionaire. And he said he realized what had happened. Where he thought his life was falling apart, God had come in there and said, there's something bigger and better. This is what he said. God had planned something bigger and better for him. Folks, we're going through garbage sometimes, and we just think that's where it stops in the music. We just think, I am going through garbage, and this is all there is. But He sees the rest of the score. He sees the rest of the music, and He's fighting for that. He's fighting to see those things happen in your life. He wants you to realize there's something else out there. You've got to have faith and realize that He is, and realize that it's faith. Remember, the pastor talked about it weeks ago. It is impossible to please God without faith. You've got to have faith that whatever you're going through now is not what you're going to be going through a year from now. And if it is, check yourself and see where you are. Say, am I spending time with God and in His Word like I ought to be? Am I studying it correctly? Am I doing those things? Folks, there's a story of a rabbi who was walking with Elijah. It's a fictional story, but he was walking with Elijah. And he went up and they came to this poor man's house, and all he had was a cow, a milk cow that was there. And he said, no, you come in. Elijah, Rabbi, y'all come in. I want y'all to come in. And he started feeding them, and he gave them bread, and he gave them milk, and he gave them a nice place to sleep. But the very next morning, as Elijah was leaving, the man's cow died. But Elijah went on his way. Then the next house they came to on their journey, they walked up. The rabbi and Elijah walked up, and it was a rich man's house, and he had all the stuff in the world, but he treated them like garbage. He said, yeah, you can stay out in the stable out there. Why don't you stay out there? He gave him a little bread and water, but he didn't say anything. He didn't go out there and talk to him or speak to him. The next day, Elijah was about to leave, and he walked up, and he got one of the town masons to come in and fix a wall that had a big hole in it, a big wall that's about to fall down. He had him fix it all up for him, and he went ahead and left. They walked on down the road, and the rabbi said, you got to tell me what's going on. This doesn't make any sense to me. Well, the cow died. Why did the cow die? And why did you repair that wall for him? He said, listen closely. This Elijah said, listen closely. He said, the night that we visited the poor man's wife was supposed to die, but God took the cow instead. And when we went to the rich man's house, behind that hole in that unrepaired wall was a treasure that would have given an enormous amount of money. But instead, I repaired that wall so he would never see it. You see, friends, there are things that happen in our lives all the time that we don't get and we don't understand. God, why did you do that? Why did you allow that? Folks, you can be confident in what the Word tells you. All things work for good. Somehow. You want Ryan to explain it? Forget it. But what the Word says is somehow it will work for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Friends, when we go in, and like Jesus said in this Word, when He goes in there and He says, wait, I don't need that food. My food is to do the will of the Father. Folks, your food during this fast and after the fast, your real food is to do the will of the Father. You start out in His general will. You need to be obedient and we need to sacrifice. Ryan needs to be obedient more and I need to sacrifice more. Then you go to His specific will and you get into His Word. And the more you get to know God, the more He begins to show you what Travis is supposed to do and what Bubba's supposed to do. He begins to tell you what Dee is supposed to do. Each one of you individually, as you spend more time in His Word, He's going to show you, I promise you that, a specific will for your life. And then, folks, we got to be okay with His sovereign will. As tough as it is to handle sometimes, you're going through garbage right now, you've got to be able to sit there and say, God is holy, I'm not, I am a worm before Him. And if it hadn't have been for His grace, I'd still be a worm before Him. And say, God, I believe in You, and I believe Your sovereign will is good. Genesis 18:25. Must not the Lord of all be right? He's always right with everything He ever does. Somebody pray for us.